Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast. Ozcast. Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show. Today I'm here with Rebecca Hopkins. Hi Rebecca, thanks for joining me.
Hi Jules.
How are you?
Me. I'm good.
Can you tell me a little bit about your experience with menopause?
Yeah, so I struggled to have children. So found out when I was 31 that my body wasn't responding to the IVF drugs that I was on. And I had unexplained infertility. And what happened years later when I came to Hong Kong, they did some blood tests and we talked about it and was diagnosed with early menopause. So my symptoms, I'd started getting symptoms in my early 30s, so hot flushes, and my periods were kind of jumping around. So they kind of thought that that's what it was. And then we used donor eggs to have our kids. So then I was having kids for a few years. Then when my twins were probably about 4 months old, the hot flushes came back. And menopause, people going through menopause usually don't have little babies to look after.
No, you were super young.
Yeah. So I was 31 when I started, but because we'd used donor eggs and did lots of IVF, I had the twins when I was 39. So my menopause kicked back in when I was 39. So I've got as soon as I get the babies to start sleeping, then I was waking up with hot flushes and it was awful. There was just, I was just not sleeping.
So it sounds like a nightmare. So when you were on the IVF drugs and going through that process, that sort of put the menopause at bay, did it? So
yeah,
you started in your early 30s, then they fake all the hormones.
Yeah, they fake your body. So, you can, if you're using an egg donor, you can get pregnant in your 60s because they can fake your uterus into acting like it's open to receiving an embryo, whereas it's the egg production you can't do at that age.
So when you first started getting these hot flushes and
cranky
the sweats and all that, and been
shouting at my husband
at 30, did you have any clue that it was menopause?
Yeah, my sister had tried to have kids as well, and she'd been diagnosed with early menopause when she was 31. Really, and given that, I didn't make the connection straight away. But it was as soon as I'd spoken to her about it, so she'd gone through it as well.
Did your mum go through early menopause?
She had all of us before she was 30, so we don't know. Well, no, so she didn't actually. She was in her 50s when she went through menopause.
Because they do say that you go through menopause around the same time that your mum did, and that's true of me.
Yeah, and not with us.
And they also say that the quality of your eggs drops dramatically 10 years before the age that your mother went through menopause. So I hit menopause. Menopause is actually, once you haven't had your period for a whole year, you're considered to be in menopause. All of the difficult stuff is perimenopause leading up to it, which can last for
10 years. It can last for.
Yeah, it can last for 10 years or 10 minutes. Do you know what I mean? Some people have nothing. It's so individual. So that would indicate that my daughter should be alert at 39. The level of her egg production may really drop.
You can do blood tests. It's much more advanced than even when 10 years ago, even then there's a blood test which tests it's called your FSH, which is your follicular stimulating hormone. So your body every month produces follicles which have eggs in them, and one matures every month, which is the one that could potentially be fertilized for you to be pregnant. That FSH is a blood test that you do, and they give you a range. So from 0 to 60, 60 is you're through menopause, 0 is you're not, and you want to be between 0 and 12. To do IVF successfully with your own eggs, your numbers are between 0 and 12. So if IVF doctors, I assume they still do the same now, is they do a follicular stimulating hormone test to see how fertile you are, and they can do an egg count. I think it's called an I can't remember, intramolecular test, which is your egg. You can do an egg count blood test as well. So they're a lot more savvy than when I first went through it.
Yeah.
But my FSH was, I think it was 11 or 12, so I was on the border. And then when we were in Hong Kong, it was 45, which means I was through.
Right.
So they can test. It's a simple blood test.
So what did you do to cope with menopause at 39 with young kids? So were you having the night sweats and not sleeping and everything? Did you have all the symptoms?
I did.
Did you have the itchiness?
I was itchy. I still get itchy. Even though I'm on hormones, I'm itchy.
Do you know what the freaky thing is? I started menopause at 44 and I got this great swelling thing right above my left boob, and I actually went to hospital because it was all swelling up, and I thought, oh my God, what if, I live on my own? What if it blocks my airway? So I went to hospital. They did all these tests. They couldn't find out what it was. And over the years, it kept just coming up in the same places, little bubbles of swelly, itchy skin for no reason. I couldn't work out what it was. And now that I'm through menopause, it stopped.
Wow.
It was menopause, but it was the weirdest, freakiest thing that it was just in the one place.
Yeah.
My other friend, she was itchy all over her face and her arms and stuff, and she's like, I think I've got a seafood allergy and all this kind of thing. But it's like, no, mate, you're in menopause.
Yeah, itchy belly for me. Like, I still get it. Like, I'm forever scratching my belly.
I know, it's freaky.
No, I just tried lots of hormones. So I went to the doctor here, and because I was so young, she said, you don't have an option to do nothing, because if you do nothing, I've got another 10 years worth of my bone degradation potentially being harmful. So she said, we have to get you back on a par with the average 40-year-old and get estrogen into you, which means either taking the pill or having other hormone replacement. And so she put me on the pill, and the pill used to send me nuts when I was young, and I knew that I was quite sensitive to it. She put me on the pill, and I think within a week I'd had arguments with a helper who I have a beautiful relationship with. We'd never had a crossword. And I was like, why can she just not do her job properly? Like, what is wrong with her? And then my husband, I'm like, why are you being a dick? Like, what is wrong with you? And it wasn't until I shouted at my 3-year-old. And I was like, what is wrong with you? And I was like, oh, it's me.
Right.
And I was the common denominator.
Yeah.
I was just, as soon as I started falling out with everyone, I was like, oh, God, that's me. So I went back to the doctor and I was in tears. I said, my family, I cannot be on this. I stopped taking the pill and I was back to being me.
Right.
She said, you can't not take it. I was like,
because of osteoporosis,
yeah, she's like,
right?
I'm like, osteoporosis, losing my family. I'll take osteoporosis, thanks. And so then I started a whole different schedule of hormones. So from vaginal ring inserts to now I'm on a patch. So it's a hormone patch. And what she said about that, which was interesting, is when you take an oral contraceptive, it can overload your liver and send your body into disarray, and that will affect your moods. And if you use a patch that goes through the skin, so I have my patch on my belly and I change it once a week. So I have a patch for 3 weeks, and then I take the patch off and I have what's called a withdrawal bleed, which it looks like a period, but it's not. It's just to clear out your uterus. And so I do that, and that doesn't go anywhere near my liver, apparently.
And has that then settled down, the hot flushes and the no sleeping and the itchiness and stuff like that? Are they gone? Or?
Yeah. Do you know, there was one thing that was interesting, though, when I went on this patch. So I hadn't had any sex drive at all, and I'd taken that as it being my fault.
Mm.
And I said to my husband, okay, this is going to get a little bit graphic. I said to my husband, it's definitely not a choice. Like, I've been masturbating since I was 12. Like, I like having an orgasm. Like, that is not the problem. I was like, it just doesn't occur to me.
Yeah.
Like, I just don't think about sex at all.
Me neither.
And then I had this patch, and it must have spiked my testosterone because I was at home. No, I was out, and I was looking at the taxi driver, and I was like, I just want to fuck him. And I was like, it's like an old Chinese guy. And then, like, people were passing, like, I'd like to fuck him as well. And I was just like, what is going on? It went for 3 days.
Too many hormones.
So I went home and I was texting my husband. I was like, you better get home from work now. We are having sex. And he's like, I'm on my way. And I was like, I had to send the kids out. And I said to Adam, is this what it's like for men? Is this what it's like? Is this how much you think about sex? Because how the hell do you get anything done? Because I've had 3 days of it and I haven't done anything except think about sex, and it was freaky.
That's hilarious. Apparently men think about sex every 15 seconds or something ridiculous.
That was me. The poor taxi driver, I was like, ooh, he's like with his shirt on. It was horrendous. And I said to Adam, I can't, like, I'm going to have to go off the patch. And he's like, just a couple more days.
But that's so interesting because when I actually hit menopause, my sex drive completely dropped and I had no interest. I don't really care. And that's been actually very good for me, given that I've been single for like 28 years or something ridiculous. So I spent a lot of time in my 30s and my 40s pining for something that I didn't have. And then as soon as I hit menopause, gone. Yeah. Gone. Don't care. Couldn't give a shit.
Which is random. Like when you're having a sexual being, it's like odd.
But it's actually quite liberating. But the great thing is when the opportunity arises, I can still switch on and be right into it. So it's just not actually the enjoyment or the passion and the joy of sex is still there. But that longing and that desire isn't there. And that's quite liberating. It's quite amazing. It's really nice not to have a focus in my brain anymore. And it's completely hormonal.
Absolutely. It took the guilt away from it being a choice that I was making to being something that was happening in my body, which was really freeing. If you haven't heard of the work of Esther Perel, she's I don't remember where she's from, but she's got a podcast and she talks about desire and love. And it's fascinating. So her work in this area, when it comes to like, especially when we've been married and our sex drive drops, and then that becomes an issue in marriages. Like, it was really interesting that my husband and I could have healthy conversations about how we integrate this without it being anyone's fault.
Yeah. Because blame is a big thing as well, isn't it? Especially with
because he thought it was just my choice. I was like, no, I just don't think about it, which is strange for me because I used to think about it a lot.
I know. It's funny how that can change. I did as well. Do you have a time span when you will come off of this and actually go through a natural menopause?
No. So they'll keep me on until they'll keep checking me. So I've had a bone density scan. And so I have to have a bone density scan every year, which checks the osteoporosis to make sure that doesn't worsen. So they've done like a baseline scan to see how dense my bones are. And then.
And what was the result of that?
Fine. So they said that's a baseline, and then they can check in a year and see if there's any potential osteoporosis, but I just have to stay on the hormones. But it changes my appetite and I've put on weight, and so that stresses me out. But it's just the byproduct.
And do you think that you're more stressed given the fact that you had the eating disorders when you were young about the putting on the weight with the menopause?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, my shame came right back. But I've done so much work around owning that story. It's a mildly interesting story in my past. Like, my eating disorders don't even resonate with me anymore. I talk about them to set the context in my Body Love workshop just because it's part of my journey, but it doesn't – it's a lifelong journey loving my body, but I'm definitely not as susceptible to the shame as much as I was when I was younger.
And Rebecca, do you have any concern about breast cancer and any of the other risks of taking these hormones?
No. It never really occurred to me, actually, till you just said that.
Oh, shit, sorry.
Thanks very much. I'm just going to go and drink.
No, apparently they've got the hormones much more under control, so the risk is way less now than it used to be. Do you know what
actually I learned recently that is a huge risk factor for breast cancer?
Smoking.
Drinking.
Oh, ooh.
Yeah. Really? Yeah, right. So that resonated with you as a drinker.
No, I'm not a big drinker. Yeah, I try my best, but I don't like it.
Yeah.
I try hard, but no.
Yeah, I think my drinking's more of a risk to breast cancer.
And do you know what? That's another thing that I've noticed in menopause. Drinking makes me massively hot flush.
Really?
Massively. It really especially during peri. All the symptoms are way worse during perimenopause than actually menopause.
I remember my mum getting allergic to like kiwi fruit and weird stuff through her menopause.
And I cried a lot. During the time I would have said, I'm completely like I haven't had any sort of mood swings with menopause. I've been fine. And now that I'm through it and I look back, it's like, oh my God, I cried loads. Yeah. And also, when you cry when you don't really have a particular reason and I
love those crying.
And you can't stop.
And it's an ugly cry. Yeah. I'm like, shut the door, don't let anyone see me. I'm going to do the ugly cry.
It just kept going and going. Yeah, it's very cathartic. I'm definitely one that's not worried too much about crying. But interestingly, I went through anxiety at the same time I was in perimenopause. So it was interesting. Sometimes these kind of things happen coincidentally in your life, like you going through menopause with these young babies and having to do all of that. It's like sometimes the universe chucks everything on us all at once, and it can be really, really difficult.
Anxiety is interesting as well because it's one of the most highly contagious emotions. So I have a phrase when I talk to parents is anxious mothers create anxious babies.
Yeah.
It's catching. So shame is another one of those contagious emotions, which is why There's a great quote of Brené's which says, so she's got The Gift of Imperfect Parenting is a podcast she did, and she has a phrase in there which like changed my life. She said, who you are as a person is a better predictor of how your kids will turn out than any parenting book you'll ever read, which is why I love doing the work with parents, because I think if we can turn that lens and have a look at ourselves, on our triggers, the shame we're feeling, and work on ourselves and loving ourselves, that changes our kids. Instead of sending them off to be fixed,
it's so true. Yeah, that's so true.
That's interesting for me, back from using an egg donor to conceive our children.
Yeah.
How much of my children are like me and how much are they inherited genetically from the egg donor.
And do you know anything about the actual donors? No?
We have picked the worst country when it comes to egg donation. Spain.
Right.
So the anonymity is very high. We only know her age, when she donated, and her blood type.
Oh, okay.
There's no identifying factors, and we'll work hard now. Actually, we're just looking at, there's lots of DNA kits you can get now to learn about your heritage.
Yes.
And there's a website called 23andMe where you can post your DNA and they will see if there's any matches out there of siblings and different things. So
that's pretty cool.
The technology will advance in that, my kids are still 5 and 4 and 3. So as they get older, in another 10 years when they might be curious about finding out who she is, hopefully there'll be some more advancements where we can actually find her.
You can hunt her down.
Well, yeah, exactly. I'm going to get a private investigator.
Yeah. So anyway, we keep jumping all over the place, but it's very exciting. So just getting back to the menopause issue, why do you think it's something that people don't really talk about that much in society these days? Why is there a bit of a taboo?
I think, so if I think of the work of Brené, who we've been talking about today, she has researched, she's got 12 years of data, and the biggest shame trigger for women across all the data she's got is appearance and aging, the top two. And it's why the body love work needs to happen. But that aging is a big shame trigger, and there's nothing more indicative of how old you are than menopause.
Yeah, yeah.
It really
is. And it's that maiden mother crone, the three phases in the sort of the Wiccan kind of. Okay, so you the maiden is the girl without the children, then the mother is the mother, and then the crone is the woman post menopause, and even that term. But in that kind of realm, it's not negative. But it is the third phase of our life.
And it's a non-childbearing, right? So it's when you stop being able to produce children.
So it's a real signifier of when you are old.
Yeah.
But also you're I forgot what I was going to say. See, and this is a symptom of menopause.
Memory loss.
I actually rang my auntie going, I wonder if I'm getting Alzheimer's. And she's just like, no, it's menopause and it too will pass. But I find that I can't remember stuff as it's in my head and then it's just gone.
Same.
Yeah.
Do you know what? Can I just say it's so nice to talk about menopause. So because I went through it early, I Googled menopausal symptoms and how to work through it, and it was all old people.
Yeah.
And I was like in my 30s, and I had no one to talk to about it. And this is probably the first decent conversation I had about menopause, because none of my friends, my friends are all in their 30s. Yeah. So they're not going through it. So I had no one, and my mum's like 70, so she's way through it, but there was no one really to talk to about it. So thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I was early in my friendship group, but now some people are catching up. So the conversations are starting to come around, but you can feel the unease, especially if there are men around listening, or there are younger women who they're not ready to hear about that. But I think conversations around it need to happen, and people need to understand what the different options are, and your option with the hormones and how you've dealt with it is really interesting, and it's great to hear. I didn't know there was something that you could put in the vagina to help with menopause. So these are the kind of conversations we need to have so people are more aware. There's an awesome documentary that was just made a couple of years. I think it might be called Menopause or the M Word or something, but that was very good to watch when I was going through it. But I really went through it on my own, and just really having my Chinese doctor helping me, and I went through the natural route. And I got to a point right at the end where I was emotionally strung out and sick of not sleeping. Like 7 years of not sleeping takes its toll. And to be fair, I've had too many sleeping tablets over that time, and that's something I wish I didn't have to do. But I can't be awake all night sweating my ass off and then come to work and teach kids for all day. I've got to get sleep. So I think it's good that we have these conversations. And with the aging thing, these sort of things, society needs to change. You know, we need to be more open. We need to not... My story in my head is that I couldn't apply for another job now and get another job or move anywhere because I'm too old and I've got to stay where I am to when I'm 60, when I have to retire. And then I've got to work on plan B, which is hopefully podcasting. Can you share this? Can you share this podcast with everyone so that I build my audience?
Retirement proofing, yeah.
But yeah, aging is a whole nother podcast. Yeah. But anyway, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining me today. Thanks for this amazing conversation on 7,000 topics. It's been brilliant. And
thank you for having me.
If anyone out there listening wants to get in touch with you for any of your workshop or to have coaching, how can they do that?
www.livebraveworkshops.com.
Great. So I have a feeling you might have a few menopausal.
Yes. Yeah. Body love,
body love,
safety,
parents, infertile.
Do you know what the most, the one that most people want to talk about is the egg donor. The
egg
donor. I get a lot of people wanting to know what it's like to parent children that you're not genetically connected to.
Yeah.
And that's a whole nother conversation, but that's one that I get most contacted. That's the one I'm passionate about, you know, because when we don't talk about these things, we create shame within our children that we're raising. So I'm deeply passionate about being open about egg donation and my kids' journey into this.
Great. Well, let's get on to that.
That's great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much.
So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.